For those who dated someone in adult entertainment, what was your experience like? Before we start, welcome back to our channel. If you're new here, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss an update. Story 1. Freshman year of college, I dated a guy I knew from high school before he got into the adult film industry. We started talking, and he was upfront about his work, so we set some boundaries and continued dating. The first red flag appeared when he kept asking if he could record me. I kept saying no, since I didn't want to be online in that way, and it just wasn't something I was comfortable with. A few weeks into our relationship, a friend reached out to catch up, and I mentioned my boyfriend. I guess word had gotten out about his porn work, because my friend asked if I was in one of his recent videos. I said no because he'd never recorded me, but when I checked his profile, there I was, recorded in a video from behind with the most degrading and insulting title. I was absolutely mortified and heartbroken. I had no idea he'd filmed or posted it. My friend tried to calm me down, saying it hadn't gotten much attention and that no one could tell it was me since my face wasn't in it. But I was in shock. When I confronted him, asking why he would do something so cruel, his response was, "I'm just hard-headed, I guess." I told him to take it down, which he did, but he seemed completely indifferent to how much he had violated me. I ended things with him and blocked him everywhere. I haven't spoken to him since. Story 2. A girl I dated in high school ended up being an escort and amateur adult film star. She was on Connect Pal and later moved to OnlyFans. She was a super proper church-going girl, Bible studies and pledges to be pure. She was a real freak. Sex was amazing. The first time I was even expecting it. I didn't have any protection. She just spat in her hand, rubbed her back hole, and told me to stick it in her. We dated till the end of high school. She was going to a very nice private college, her dad is a professor there, and I was going to the local state university. I thought we could stay together, but she wanted to have more fun and date other people. We stayed connected and had booty calls throughout college. One of those booty calls she told me she was seeing an older guy who was paying for her apartment, but they weren't exclusive. I was okay, cool, that sounds like a sweet deal, thinking now she was probably a sugar baby. She later got into the cam stuff. A few years later she called to ask if I could pick her up from the police station. She was arrested for escort work. I was chewing her out about what the F she was doing as a hooker. She said it was a misunderstanding. A guy offered her $300 for spending time with him, but when they went up to the room, he turned out to be a cop and arrested her. I stopped communicating with her then. She texted out of the blue asking if she could borrow $900 because her brother Marcus needed to get out of jail. I was like, girl, I've known you since high school. You have one sister. I've never seen anyone in your family named Marcus. She finally told me he was her boyfriend/manager. I told her no. Just last year I saw a news piece about some guy named Marcus being arrested for escort service ring. I texted to see if she was alright, and she had moved up to Colorado to get away from him. Crazy stuff. Story 3. Many years ago, probably 2007 to 2008, if my math is right, I started dating an exotic dancer in college. I learned that until very recently she lived in California in a place she called Corn Valley. If I'm remembering correctly, it was San Fernando. She did adult films there for a while right after high school, made a respectable amount of money, and moved to the East Coast to go to college. Dating her was a wild experience. I constantly felt like I was on the verge of being replaced. She did whatever she wanted, whenever the whim struck her, and I could tell she was always probing me for insecurity, which I simply didn't have. Despite all that, she wasn't demanding at all, and she paid for everything and would get mildly annoyed if I snuck a check or paid for something behind her back. The sex wasn't good. She had zero desire to please anyone but herself, and would get irritated if I finished and couldn't perform after, despite her never continuing after she got hers. She was incredibly conceited, and would basically only talk about herself. One day she didn't show up to the coffee shop we were supposed to meet at to study, and her phone was off. Cell phones were relatively new and people treated them differently, so I wasn't worried, so I went to her apartment. When she answered the door and saw me, she just went, "Oh, sorry, I'm seeing someone else." When I asked for details, she just kind of shrugged her shoulders and said she needed to go. I later saw her walking with some Turbo Ultra Beefcake, and for the next year or so would often see her upgrade to another dude. We had one class together a semester later, and she legitimately might have forgotten my name. Really glad I wasn't emotionally invested in that one. Story 4. I went on a few dates with a girl. The first time we met, she invited me to her place and asked for some shawarma, which I brought. She wore no makeup and was dressed casually, keeping things non-sexual. On our second date, I picked her up and we went clubbing in West Hollywood. This time, she was well-dressed and stunning, with her makeup done. We had a great time and ended up back at her place, where we had amazing sex, more intimate than anything overly explicit. The next day, she did an interview, I think, for Playboy Radio on SXM. She mentioned our date, not naming me, but describing what we did and noting she had a great time while taking things slow. The hosts responded with, we had one more date for dinner and drinks, but after that, she got busier and eventually ghosted me. It turned out she moved to Vegas impulsively, saying she needed a break and cutting off her social media. Years later, she reactivated her accounts, telling me she left the industry and wanted a quieter life. She did some work here and there for extra money, but mostly seemed to seek a regular existence. All her provocative content disappeared, and even her photos became more modest. That last time was several years ago. She was always sweet to me, but there was something off inside her. I sensed it. Still, I could tell she was trying to move forward, and her dating regular people was part of that journey. I sincerely hope she found true happiness and peace. Story 5. I was married to someone who became a very high-level OnlyFans girl. In real life, she was nothing like she was on camera, for better or for worse. We were married years before she did it. She stopped after a few years, then a couple years later we divorced, not related to sex work at all. The money was fantastic. It paid for vehicles, vacations, etc. I mean, to us, it was just play money. We both worked day jobs, but she was a fantastic, wholesome woman and the last person in the world you'd expect to be doing adult films, but she was uniquely very attractive, and that's enough to make a ton of cash, I guess. I ended up divorcing her because she was never a good partner, before or after the OnlyFans. I worked more and made more money than her, and when we were doing OnlyFans, I spent up to 20 hours per week marketing for her and doing video and photo editing. She never cooked a single meal during our entire marriage, and she had 2 chores: clean the bathroom and vacuum. I did everything else, even though she had significantly more free time. The straw that broke the camel's back was that I ended up seeing my lifelong serious crush, for 24 years, at a funeral. That night I confessed it all, only for her to tell me she felt the same, only way more than I even did. So, I said F it, I'm giving this a shot. It worked out better for me, by far. Edit. The sex with my ex-wife was mediocre at best, and I taught her everything she knew. Story 6. I met and casually dated a successful OnlyFans girl for a while after connecting on a dating app. A couple of months in, I discovered she was involved in OnlyFans and made a shocking amount of money. I got suspicious when she bought 2 PS5s in one day without batting an eye. We had a great time together. She was down to earth, recently divorced, and the sex was fantastic. I asked a bit about her OnlyFans, and she showed me some of her content, mostly nudes and solo shots, plus a few with her ex-husband, but nothing too wild. She revealed the thousands of DMs she received, and I believed her when she said she never took any chats further. It became amusing that all these guys wanted her attention, yet I was the one getting to sleep with her. We briefly discussed creating content together, but I never felt fully at ease with it. I have many identifying tattoos, and I didn't want our time together to feel like a job or involve money changing hands. Life got busy for both of us, and eventually, we stopped seeing each other. Story 7. I dated a girl when I was 19. She was wild, complete opposite of me, and taught me a lot about just not giving a fuck. Poster child for social bravery. She always said I was the nicest person she had ever been with, but she had a rough life. Her dad was a Scientologist, and she'd tell me about the men in the church who would pass her around as a kid. The reason I get hostile when Scientologists try to talk to me on the street. In terms of the sex, one night she was on top of me. The room was dark, my hands on her hips, when I felt this sudden hot stinging feeling on my chest. The light switch was right above me, so I turned it on. This insane woman pulled out a razor blade and cut me while riding me. I told her to stop and kept going because, duh, and she did it again. Her taste for extremes was her downfall. She left me for her abusive ex. He put her in the hospital soon after, got her on heroin, forced her into doing adult movies, and she had a career for a few years where she was one of the up-and-comers to watch or whatever. We kept in contact, but it was mostly whenever she was down on her luck and needed to talk. She got out of the industry, got clean, had a kid, and a year later relapsed and died. We only dated for a summer, but the impact she had on me, a socially awkward anxiety-filled kid, is something I think about almost every day. I always think about her kid and hope she only got the best of her mom. Story 8. I worked in the adult film industry during the 80s and 90s behind the camera. I dated several of the women in the business back then, though it was rarely anything serious. Some were just really fun to be around. One day, I was on a shoot filming this stunning woman in action. We ended up talking for about 2 hours while waiting for another girl to show up. I asked if she wanted to grab dinner, and we did. Long story short, we're still married today. So, yeah, the first time I met my wife was filming her having sex with another guy. Go figure. Story 9. I was with a strip dancer for a while, who ended up doing adult movies eventually down in Miami. Also ended up overdosing on drugs down in Miami and dying too. I am still not over that shit. She was the best person I knew, super fun to be around, very unselfish, friendly, kind to people, like if she saw them getting picked on, she would defend them. She was also really crazy and tough. Actually, I saw her get in multiple fights before, and even took down a dude once. But she wasn't butch, she was very feminine. She was my best friend, and I really loved her a lot. It was just unfortunate that her life was pretty much a tragedy from start to finish. Sexually violated by her dad from the age of 7, subsequent substance abuse issues until the very day she died 7 years ago. I never had as much fun with anyone else. She was obviously very promiscuous in life, I mean like before she even started strip dancing and all that, but that never bothered me. I kind of figured there were some underlying abuse issues, so I didn't hold all that against her. I just got used to it. She wasn't like flagrant about it in front of me. I just knew it went on when I wasn't around, and it didn't really even bother me that much at all. I genuinely loved her though. It really devastated me when she died. I was in rehab when it happened, and I left the program and got high when I got the news and overdosed myself twice in 2 days. But I eventually got clean. Sober 4 years now. Story 10. I've dated 3 women. Nothing too serious, but it was interesting. All 3 had similar issues that were pretty obvious from the start. They were all slow to open up or be vulnerable. They all had serious substance problems and clearly carried some kind of trauma from their past. Their love language was sex, unsurprisingly. That's how they said thank you for even the smallest favor. It was often more over the top and flamboyant than when we were just having normal sex, which was more about satisfying the urge. There was a lot of it as well. It's how they showed affection. There were also a lot of drugs. They always had something, could get anything they wanted. I'm not a psychiatrist, but it definitely seemed like they were dealing with a lot of stuff. Shocking, right? I went into all of them assuming it would be casual, and it was. No real horror stories. I never expected anything serious, and it mostly played out as I expected. No big breakups or bad blood. We were never exclusive, and eventually we just drifted apart. No hard feelings toward any of them. One of them is still working in the business as an actress. One went behind the camera, and one left completely, married a millionaire, and now lives in Vegas. The latter 2 seem to be doing better, hopefully. The one still in the business hasn't changed much, but I haven't spoken to her in a while, so I hope she's gotten help too. Overall, it was an interesting experience. They were all sweet people at heart, dealing with a lot. I sincerely wish them all well. Story 11. I was really young and from a small town. While she had already experienced a lot, she'd been picked by Penthouse and spent a few years in the strip club scene. Our life experiences were worlds apart. I was still figuring myself out. I had been talking to another girl in our astronomy class all semester, but one day she didn't show up, and my ex swooped in. We exchanged numbers, and she invited me to the club to watch her work. I thought I was being used for money by some stripper, but she actually liked me, or at least just wanted to hook up. I went to the club and was blown away by how she spun on the pole. We did a ton of drugs over the next few days and ended up saying we were official. I think she regretted it a few days later but tried to make it work because I was so into it. No matter what I did, I couldn't impress her. I wanted to be the perfect boyfriend. At the start, she made it clear that we could only work if I let her do drugs, just weed, but she was high all the time, and hook up with this girl she was into, which I agreed to. I had a lot of fun and really liked her, but I was way too into it. I moved in almost immediately. A few months later, she realized it wasn't for her and started acting really distant. She broke it off, but a couple of days later, she found out she was pregnant. She didn't want to keep it, so I helped her through the abortion. She tried to make it work again afterward, but things got messy with games back and forth, and eventually, we both just gave up. Every few years, we interact on social media. I think she's out of the industry now, and had a kid a few years later. She's a cool chick, and I kind of wish we'd catch up, just so I could show her I'm not a dweeb. I was just super young. My behavior during that relationship still bothers and embarrasses me. Story 12. I dated a guy whose last LTR was an adult film star, and the industry left its impression on him. Their story was that his family owned a video rental store in the 80s and 90s when it was really big business. They got in on the ground floor of VHS and regularly were invited to parties at the Playboy Mansion. He met an adult film star at one of the parties and they started dating. He owned a contracting business and she did films part-time. He wanted to get married and settle down, but she liked the independence and the money. They went around and around, but she wouldn't quit doing films, so they broke up after 4 or 5 years. He was devastated. After that, he couldn't settle down, compared all women to hookers, and women were somewhat disposable to him. He pursued me hard, but our relationship never took off. In my mind, I still cannot separate him from the damages of the adult film industry 10 years later. Story 13. Not exactly a star, but I dated a young woman who did a few XXX scenes with known producers, and when we were dating it was her career. She told me on the first date, and I was a little taken aback, but still game since she was so gorgeous and sexy. It was perfect for me at the time, coming off a long-term relationship and also feeling the last of my young man oats as I turned 40. We dated on and off for almost a year. She was beautiful and smart and fun to hang around with, but she was a little broken inside with little self-esteem and a strong desire to please a father figure, I guess. And so young, though she had wisdom and intelligence beyond her years. In the end, the age and dynamic made it a little uncomfortable and we stopped seeing each other, though we hooked up a few times subsequently. The sex was amazing and no holds barred, with her constantly saying things like, "I want to practice this thing I might have to do for a scene, are you game?" and telling me how she'd had a crush on me forever. She switched effortlessly between film star talk and real intimacy in bed, which was super hot and made both feel very genuine. She was like some magic phenomenon that made me feel better after a period of loss and mourning, without asking barely anything but attention and affection in return. I think it filled both our needs at the time, but was never going to be a long-term intimate relationship, which is a shame because I thought very highly of her. We were just in wildly different places in our lives. I think that now, with maturity, on both of our parts, we'd be more compatible, but that's life, right? Sometimes we meet the right person at the wrong time. Story 14. I've dated 2 women. One was the typical dancer turned model turned exotic dancer turned adult movie star. The other was your average OnlyFans content creators. The two, and their social circles, couldn't be any more different. The first was an awesome human, and while we didn't work out, I still hold a lot of respect for her. She's a realtor now and doing well. Everything about her career is pretty generic, except she got out before it consumed her. She started exotic dancing and modeling to pay for college, took a few solo and FF movie roles to get more money, that led to a few MF and then to a few orgies and finally one gangbang. I met her right as she was getting out. Our first date was 2 nights after her GB. Sex was amazing, and she craved more intimate sex most of the time. But she was a performer, and if I wanted to role play something, she'd nail the part. She also had zero jealousy and was strongly bi. I think she was more sexually into women and being hot AF with a great personality. The second was someone I dated for a short time, but she really made an impact. It's really my fault that I ignored all the warning flags. Basically, in the pandemic she lost her job and she, like everyone else it seems, started an OnlyFans. At first it was her doing solo stuff, then she added me without my face and things were going well. She was making decent money, learning all about film and editing, and it wasn't bad. But as soon as she started losing subscribers, all those ignored warning signs came out in force. Every minute of her life was about how she needed more subscribers, why no one thought that she was pretty anymore, and it wasn't about the money at that point, it was all about feeding her ego. She started talking with people online about doing collabs, then about surgeries, and it just spiraled into chaos. She started hanging out with Botox queens with collective IQs that couldn't break triple digit. I was planning to break it off, but ended up doing so on the day she came over with the most ridiculous looking duck lip. I couldn't look at her talk without wanting to bust up laughing and crying for her. She came over, hoping to do AMFF with her friend, and I just couldn't. During this time, I probably met around 20 successful and hot content creators. They were all trash. Story 15. I dated a girl long distance when I was a teenager who went on to do amateur adult films. She had an OnlyFans under a different name some time ago. I only found out a few months back when I stumbled across an album of her nudes and recognized her despite her face not being in them. I can't say I was surprised. She'd been groomed and abused as a kid, basically by every guy she dated, used to get naked on Omegle for old guys when she was 15, etc. I think going through what she went through messed with her sexual development, made her hypersexual. She'd cheat as well, just had no control over her sexual urges at all. She's now a he. Story 16. I met a cam girl at a bar 8 years ago and hooked up that night. I thought it would just be a one-time thing until a few months later, she reached out and invited me to her place, which turned out to be much more luxurious than I expected. Apparently, she was making a great income and had fans sending her expensive gifts. She must have been more popular than most, but I never bothered to look her up. I visited her a few times, and we'd go out for dinner and drinks, then end up messing around back at her place. Sometimes she'd show me her streaming sessions, but I wasn't that interested. I'd spend the night, but every time I fell asleep, she'd stay up. And when I woke up, she'd still be awake. She was really nice, and I could tell she had at least some genuine feelings for me. I'd wake up to lewd selfies and get messages like, "I miss your kisses," and such. I think I could have tried to pursue something serious. She was fun to be around, let me be myself, and was extremely attractive. The issue was that there was no way my family would accept her being in adult movie industry, and honestly, I don't think I could handle it either. We eventually drifted apart, mostly because I started distancing myself. Even though I'm in the best relationship of my life now, I still think about her and hope she's doing well. Story 17. I dated a girl for a few months in 2017. She tried to hide from me that she had worked in adult films in the recent past, less than 6 months before I met her. I'm not going to lie, sex was great, and she was open for anything in bed, even threesomes with some of her friends. A few months after our relationship started, she finally confessed that she had worked in films for around 2.5 years, but she had quit the industry. I wasn't expecting this, but somehow, I wasn't surprised, maybe due to her very open and kinky attitude towards sex. Don't get me wrong, I loved sex with her, and I don't have any problems with girls that are very open about sex, but it's definitely something unusual. Coming back to her old profession, I was surprisingly okay with that, especially since she was retired now. However, around the same time that she confessed this, I also found out that she was a drug user, and that was the deal breaker for me. Story 18. I've dated 2 male adult film stars in the past, not at the same time. Neither lasted very long, but it was alright while it lasted. Both guys used the money to fund their tech startups, with varying success, so I caught them on the tail end of their sex work career. One guy is now very successful and has an app/website that I see around pretty often. He was sweet, very romantic, but talked a lot and was incredibly impatient. And man, he had great taste in fancy restaurants. The other guy was getting kicked out of a bar for doing coke in the bathroom last time I saw him. He had a pretty rough life, I think, and had some other issues going on. I also think this guy had ties with some organized crime. His apartment always had shipments of arms going in and out. Very strange. Both always paid for everything, were strictly monogamous, and pretty protective of me around other guys. They also had a fair amount of free time. Both relationships ended up ending not because of their job, but it just didn't click. Hope they're both doing well. Story 19. A close friend of mine in 2006 dated a top 10 vivid adult film star. He was a male stripper and entertainer himself, and was all juiced up and always dressed up. The type of guy who had a stripper pole in the middle of his house. Man, where do I even start? They were pretty much living a wild and crazy life. I filmed them a few times, just randomly hanging out at his house, and he throws me a Sony camcorder. She turned out to be a super bitch to him though, not that he was Prince Charming or anything, mainly because she was on top of the world at the time and she didn't budge for anybody in life. She had her moments where she was pretty funny and great to be around. Funny story, she contacted him on MySpace, actually, and of course she matched the look of the types he was dating, screwing, at the time, but he wasn't into adult films, mainly because he had no reason to be. He was living out a film star lifestyle as is, being a stripper and owning/running a stripper business. So, he meets up with her for a night out and they start with a dinner at a nice restaurant in our hometown. Well, he calls me the next day, and this is what he says: "Bro, so last night I went out to dinner with this chick, and all these guys kept coming up to her saying it was nice to meet you, and some asked for her autograph. After 2 to 3 guys I asked her, 'Are you a somebody?' And she says, 'Yeah, I'm an adult film star. Is that okay?' I told her frig yeah, I don't give an F, and I brought her to my house and we went to town. Bro, this chick has 600 cc's, man. I love it. I was just cracking up when he told me." Story 20. I went on a date with an adult film star who, at the time of the date, I didn't know they were. We talked about a bunch of stuff, but when work came up, she was standoffish with talking about it. She said she wasn't sure if she was going to stay at her current job long. She said being there was eating her up, and it made her sad to talk about while she was trying to decide if she would stay in her industry, and I just sort of left it at that. We had a good time, and I went back to her very pink apartment. We had sex and I remember thinking, this is too good. This feels professional. But, of course, it didn't register that she actually was a frigging professional. The next morning, we grabbed breakfast, and I tried to ask if she was up for a second date. She said yes, but just told me not to ask about her job, and she would tell me about it when she was ready. A few days went by with us talking, and her being unsure about when she was available for our second date. The conversation was good. We replied to each other quickly, and she was just as excited to talk to me as I was to talk to her, but when the topic of the second date came up, she was just hesitant to pick a day. Eventually she decided to tell me that she wasn't ready for a relationship, and it's because she decided to stay in her industry, to keep working the job she was working. I said I don't care what her job is, and she said she cared. It would make her feel insecure about my feelings toward her, and she didn't want to constantly have anxiety about that. She didn't go into specifics, but when she put the final nail in the coffin of our budding relationship, she said that if I wanted to know more, I could Google her stage name. Carmen Calloway. This wasn't her actual name. I knew her by Madison on our date. We stayed in touch for a bit through social media, and then eventually I moved to a new state across the country, met my current wife, and let Madison become a fond memory. But I did look her up recently, and she is now one of the most outspoken voices against the adult film industry. I'm glad she got out of it and started fighting back against the abuse that industry inflicts on everyone, from performer to consumer. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up, subscribe, and hit the bell icon so you never miss an update.